Okay, welcome everyone. Today the webinar will be in English. I'm delighted to welcome all of the people taking part in the second webinar. Today our guest is Kitty Anderson, the intersex activist from Iceland, Secretary of the Board of OAY Europe, the Organization of Intersex, and the founder of Intersex Iceland. Kitty Anderson works at the European level. She has worked with the Equality and Anti-Discrimination Committee of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe on their intersex resolution. And she's the member and chairperson of Icelandic Human Rights Office in Iceland. Today we will be speaking about the intersex issues and intersex rights. So we will start with the short definition of intersex itself, and then Kitty will share the stories and experience of being an intersex person and what problems are faced by intersex people in Europe and in particular countries. It's going to be hopefully personal stories. So let's just let's try to respect each other. And in the Q&A session, which followed the lecture of Kitty, you can ask questions that can help you understand better the issues of intersex people and can be maybe helpful in your daily practice as a medical professionals, medical doctors, and medical students. We know that with us in the room are a few psychologists, so that can be useful for you as well to hear more about intersex aspects. So yes, not to take more time of Kitty, I would like to give you the floor. So feel free to deliver your lecture. And after that, as I mentioned, we will have time to ask questions. And I'm gonna explain later how it works. You just have to press one button to ask for the voice, and or you can as well write the questions in a chat, which is at the bottom of the window, and we will try to answer these questions too. So Kitty, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kitty. I'm going to start with just a brief definition of what intersex is and what intersex is not. So intersex is a term that refers purely to biology. As a term, it means people who are born with variations in sex characteristics. So sex characteristics are divided into two groups. There are primary sex characteristics. These are the biological factors that we connect with sex, such as chromosomes, your inner reproductive system, your genitalia, or your hormone status, so either the hormones you produce or how your body responds to certain hormones. Secondary sex characteristics are the sex characteristics that appear during puberty. So this is things like muscle mass and fat distribution, hair growth. So puberty, going through puberty, hair growth starts in under your arms or your facial hair, so things like beards. It's also, so secondary sex characteristics are all of these things that appear during puberty. So breast growth as well, menstruation, all these aspects. So as a term, intersex just means that either when you're born, your primary sex characteristics are not typical, or that when you go through puberty, your puberty is not typical. So this can, in my own personal case, this means that when I was born, I was assigned female at birth. I was born, the doctors thought I was a girl, I was handed to my mother, and yeah, my mother had a healthy little girl. 3 weeks later, I was in the hospital again due to a hernia. A hernia is when the lining in your stomach tears. So at 3 weeks old, I had to go in for a hernia operation. And my mother was told that this would take maybe an hour, 90 minutes max. 5, 6 hours later, I was still in surgery. And she didn't know why. She kept asking the people at the hospital, what is going on? Why? What happened? Why is my daughter still in surgery? And nobody would give her any information whatsoever. I come out of surgery, she takes me home, no information is provided. She brings me back into hospital a week later because she thought I was developing an infection in the incision, where the doctors cut. The medical professionals look at this, they realized that my body was rejecting the seams and everything was sorted out. But during this visit, she was asked to come into a room and speak to a specialist. So she comes into this room and there are 2 doctors sitting there. One is the specialist and one is his assistant. And the specialist doesn't say a word. The assistant just sits there and is talking to my mother and saying, well, we have discovered that your daughter has a severe chromosome abnormality. And wouldn't really tell her anything more than that. They wouldn't tell her what my chromosome makeup was. They wouldn't really give her any information. All they said that all that they told her was that there was a specialist coming back from the United States, from education there, who would be able to answer her questions. So a week later, she comes back to the hospital to meet with the specialist. That week that she spent home with me, she was very sure that I would live with multiple severe disabilities. Because when she heard severe chromosome abnormality, she assumed that I would be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, that I would not be able to feed myself, that I would not be able to speak, that I would not be able to go to school, that she would have to take care of me for the rest of my life. So when she goes back to the hospital to speak to the specialist, she finds out the truth. The truth was that I had XY chromosomes. That was it. So she starts asking questions. What does this mean? And the doctor explains that I have XY chromosomes, but that my body does not respond to androgens. So androgens are hormones like testosterone. And she's told that I do not have a uterus, that I had internal gonads, I wouldn't be able to have children through carrying a child myself. I would have to adopt or foster. And she starts asking questions about my life. Will I be able to go to school? Yes. Will she have to use a wheelchair? No. Will she have disabilities? No. So due to doctors finding it so difficult to discuss this, they sent my mother home and let her suffer for a week because it was too hard for them to have this discussion. They let her believe things and create things in her mind that didn't really exist because it was too difficult for them to discuss this. In my case, I have my body is completely androgen insensitive. This means that no matter how much testosterone you inject me with or give me, my body will not respond to it. It will only convert it to estrogens. This is just one of over 40 different variations in biology that are under the umbrella of intersex. In some cases, a child can be born with an XXY chromosome makeup and not even know it. In some cases, a woman is born with 3 X chromosomes, and she might not ever find out. In some cases, this has nothing to do with chromosomes, really. It just has to do with hormones. So a fetus that has XX chromosomes is exposed to a lot of testosterone in utero and is born and assigned as a boy. And then only later they find out that this boy actually has internal ovaries or uterus, something like that. This can also refer to children who are born with genitals that don't look like a typical vagina or a typical penis. So either the genitals are somewhere in between, or it is just a slightly larger clitoris or a penis that isn't shaped quite like most penises. So these children who are visible at birth are the children who are at highest risks of various surgical interventions. And surgical interventions are of all kinds. So the children who are born with a visible difference are often scheduled for surgery within the first few months of their lives. And these surgeries include clitoral reduction surgeries. That is, they cut off the tip of the clitoris and lift it up, and then they cut out the middle part of the clitoris and remove it. Then they sew the tip of the clitoris back on. This can also be operations such as vaginoplasties in very young children. So a vaginoplasty is when they perform a surgery to create a vagina when the vagina is very shallow. Young children who have been subjected to vaginoplasties need to have their vaginas dilated. So this means that either a medical professional or a parent will insert a plastic penis-shaped object into the child's vagina to keep it open. Often intersex children who have had these surgeries will have to sleep with the dilator, and many have reported that this is very painful. These can also be surgeries that move the tip of, move the urethra from, if the urethra is not quite at the tip of the penis, they will move the urethra from the underside of the penis to the tip of the penis. So all of these surgical procedures carry high risk of scar tissue. And the thing with scar tissue in young children such as these is that scar tissue will not grow with the child. If the scar tissue gets stretched out and starts breaking down, another operation will be needed to fix the damage that the first operation caused. So within our community, we, for example, have young girls, just over 20, who have had 2, 3, or 4 vaginoplasties throughout their teen years and throughout their childhood and teen years. And the results are still very poor. That many of them have been told that they will need yet another operation to fix the damage that the first operations caused. Operations in this area on children can also lead to lifelong incontinence. So we have young people out there who will need to wear pads for the rest of their life because the surgeries that they were subjected to mean that they cannot quite control their own urine flow anymore. These can also, interventions that are performed on intersex people are not only limited to surgical interventions. We see quite disturbing trends towards treating increasingly younger children with very strong hormones. So injecting young children with testosterone or injecting young children with estrogen. None of these treatments have been proved to be successful. There is no data that is backing up this treatment paradigm. This treatment paradigm originates in the 1950s and 60s in the United States. A psychologist in the US during that time named John Money was of the opinion that you could take any child, perform a surgical operation on them to change the appearance of their sex characteristics. So, for example, take a boy and perform a vaginoplasty on him and raise him as a girl. And so long as he didn't know what had happened to him, he would agree with that he was a girl. So this theory, which was later disproven completely because it's complete bullshit. Please Google John Money intersex if you want to learn more about this. This theory sort of became the basis that if intersex children weren't surgically assigned as either male or female, that they would grow up and not be able to identify as being a man or a woman. When we think about the existence of trans people, this theory is sort of kind of blown out of the water a bit, because a trans woman will very often not agree with the gender assignment that is assumed she will have as a child, just because she was born with a penis. The thing is that gender identity and biology aren't exactly matched up. You can have a body that doesn't quite fit with being male or female and still identify as a man or a woman. According to what research is out there, the majority of intersex people identify as men or women. So, to recap briefly, intersex people are born with biological variations in their sex characteristics and are subjected to extremely invasive, irreversible medical treatments to normalize their appearance. The reason that this has become so entrenched in the medical system is because of a legacy of secrecy. So the majority of us who are born with variations in sex characteristics are told that we shouldn't discuss this with anyone else. And very often we are told that we will never meet anyone else like ourselves. And due to the fact that for decades the teachings were always, don't talk about this, don't tell anyone, don't share this with anyone, society will not be able to understand this, then it was very hard for intersex people to sort of step out and speak out about the effects that this had on them. It wasn't, in fact, until the late 90s that we actually start seeing people publicly speaking out against what was going on and what was happening. However, since then, we've seen a huge uptick in these issues being discussed as what they truly are: human rights violations. We see the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child issuing recommendations to multiple countries that these interventions are actually in breach of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. Also, the UN Committee Against Torture, Cruel and Degrading and Inhuman Treatment have issued statements saying the same. Recently, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe issued a resolution, again, stating that these interventions, if there is not consent by the person that they are being performed on, then they constitute human rights violations. So, even though these treatments do constitute human rights violations, it's not just about these treatments. It's also about the way that intersex people are just in general treated by the medical community very often. And here I'm not saying all doctors are like this. We have allies within the medical community who are amazing, but this is quite common. These things are quite common. So in my own case, I was lied to for the first 13 years of my life. My mother found out when I was around 6 weeks old, or 4 or 5 weeks old, but my pediatric endocrinologist told her that she was not allowed to tell me. So she kept this secret from me for the first 13 years of my life. The reason that she had to tell me was that at the age of 13, I had to start hormone replacement therapy because I was forcibly sterilized at the age of 3 months. My internal testes were removed from my body. My mother provided consent for this because she was told that if this operation was not performed, that I would get cancer and probably not live to adulthood. The cancer risk that was being referred to was the cancer risk of a XY boy who was born with undescended testes. This research wasn't actually performed on people with the same biology as me. And today, it is known that the cancer risk is comparable to a woman's inherent risk of breast cancer. Every woman has a risk of breast cancer, but we don't generally go around offering every woman a double mastectomy or removing of both the breasts just to prevent the cancer risk. The cancer risk can be monitored through blood testing and other sonogram and other measures. So at the age of 13, my mother sits me down and tells me this. And this is the first time that I hear about anything like this in my life. So I was sitting there hearing this truth about myself that I didn't even realize could be possible, while also realizing that my mother had lied to me for 13 years. I took it kind of hard to find out that my body was different. I was 13. I was expecting to start my period soon. I was expecting like certain things to happen, and being told exactly at the point in time when I was waiting for all of this to start that this didn't apply to me was quite difficult. However, that truly wasn't what was most damaging to me. What was most damaging to me was the fact that my mother had lied to me. And this completely destroyed all the trust I had in adults around me. Completely. I did not trust anything an adult said. I became quite obstinate, and I'm quite sure that I was quite a horrible teenager for that first year or so after I was told. My mother would ask me to do things, and I would just sort of, no. I just ignore her. Teachers would ask me to do things, and I just sit there and ignore them because they were adults and they couldn't be trusted and they told lies. So, after several months of this, my mother talks to my pediatric endocrinologist, who has me sent in for a psychiatric evaluation. I'm sent in for a psychiatric evaluation and diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, and ODD, oppositional defiancy disorder. Due to these two diagnoses, I am then institutionalized in a state psychiatric ward for children and teenagers. Before I went into the state psychiatric ward, I had an appointment with my pediatric endocrinologist. During that appointment, he told me very clearly that I was not allowed to mention this to anyone in the psychiatric ward. That if I did, it would completely interfere with my treatment. They wouldn't provide me with the same level of care that I would get if they didn't know, and that I had to keep this a secret from them. Well, I was a very stubborn child at this time, and if an adult told me to do something, I would turn around and do the exact opposite. So I go into the state psychiatric ward and don't listen to my doctor. I tell the people there everything. We talk. I'm in there for about 7 weeks, 7.5 weeks, before I'm discharged. And when I'm discharged, I have a new diagnosis. The diagnosis is no longer ADHD and ODD. It's mild depression brought on by traumatic life events. Basically, I was depressed because I found it traumatizing that my mother lied to me. Yeah, depressed because I was lied to. That was it. My mother sort of, realizes at this point that this is wrong, and we sort of start talking about it a bit, but I still do not trust my mother at this point. I don't know how I can. It wasn't until a year after that, when I'm 15 and my cousin is born. And it turns out that my cousin shares my exact biology. We're both androgen insensitive people. And it wasn't until my mother and my mother's sister, my cousin's mother, sat down with me and said, we know that how this was dealt with you was wrong, that it was damaging to you, that it caused you pain, and we do not want the same to happen to your cousin. So when it came to my cousin, we decided that we would tell her everything, that this would not be kept a secret from her, that we would tell her, give her information as she grew up in an age-appropriate way. Now, of course, you don't tell a 3-year-old, oh, you have XY chromosomes and this, and like explain biology to them, because they probably won't understand that. You can, however, have conversations with a 3-year-old about how different people have families in different ways. That's easy. You can read stories to your child about families who were created through adopting a child. And then as she grew older, we just kept telling her things, just a little at a time. And so she grew up always having known. However, this was not very popular with her pediatric endocrinologist, who was the same one as I had. Every time that my family came to see him, we would be told that what we were doing to her was damaging to her, that we were hurting her, that we would be causing her unnecessary pain by telling her all of this at such a young age. Well, we just didn't listen to him. We sort of took the decision that, sure, we'll listen to him when it comes to things that are actually medically relevant, so like blood tests or things to do with actual biology. But we would not listen to him when it came to her psyche, her well-being, her mental health. And we're very glad that we did not. When she was 10 years old, she got up in front of her entire class and gave them a presentation about how she was a bit different from them. And they all got it. They understood. They were 10. They understood that she was just a little bit different, and that she would probably, if she was going to have a family, have to adopt children, and that she would not have a period. So they fully understood. She wasn't teased. She wasn't bullied. In fact, most of the kids forgot. She ended up telling them again when she was 12, and then again when she was 15. And at that point, she was a bit annoyed and was like, I've already told you this twice before. So it was such a non-issue to them that they didn't really think about it that much. And the reason it was a non-issue to them was because it was presented in that way. It was presented as, this is something that happens, and this is who I am. And it was all fine. However, our medical treatment following all of this continued to be problematic. In my case, I start hormone replacement therapy, and I have a lot of issues with the hormone replacement therapy. I'm on patches, so like, you know, those nicotine patches you stick on, the same thing except for with estrogen hormones. I couldn't use them. My skin was too sensitive, and they would just leave burn marks on my skin. So then I switched to a gel, and my skin is too sensitive, and my skin just dried out and started flaking and cracking and bleeding. Then I'm switched to a hormone implant, and these are hormone implants that are usually given to women during menopause. And for women during menopause, then the implant should last 4 to 6 months. In my case, I seem to be emptying them in 3. So after my first implant, 3 months later, after feeling fine on the implant, I start having hot flushes and like waking up during the night and sweating and sort of all of these things that women in their 50s and 60s who are going through menopause experience. And this went on for 3 months, and I kept getting worse and worse, and until I got my next implant, and then I felt better again. I told my doctors about this, how the implant wasn't lasting long enough, so they cut it down after having 6 months, and then 6 months they tried cutting it down to 5 months, and this continued. I'd get an implant, it would last 3 months, I'd go through menopause, I'd get a new implant, and shortly, over the period of a few years, they shortened the time from 6 months to 4 months. So having the implant every 4 months, 3 months fine, 1 month menopause. I went through menopause about 30 times before I hit 30. And then finally, they stopped manufacturing that implant, and they switched me to injections instead. And I finally stopped going through menopause again and again and again. However, by that time, it had already taken an irreversible effect on my health. In my family, there are high levels of fibromyalgia, Hashimoto, and MS. Especially high is fibromyalgia, but the majority of women in my family are not diagnosed with fibromyalgia until in their menopause, usually late menopause. I went through menopause over 30 times and ended up on disability due to chronic fibromyalgia. I spent 2 years in rehabilitation just to rehabilitate my body back to a level where it was functional. My cousin had it worse. For some reason, our pediatric endocrinologist decided that the problem with me wasn't that I hadn't received enough hormones. No, too many hormones. Sorry. My pediatric endocrinologist, when it came to my cousin, he was of the belief that why I was having these experiences was that my hormone levels, I had been given too many hormones, not that I wasn't getting enough. So he put her on hormone therapy, which was 1 microgen pill. We're talking about oral contraceptives here. 1 microgen pill every other day. She starts on this at the age of 13, and it isn't until she is 18 and goes to an adult endocrinologist who looks at her hormone dose, is in complete and utter shock, and doubles it immediately, that my cousin actually went through puberty. We hadn't really understood why she always seemed a bit childish. But it was because she wasn't given enough hormones to finish her puberty until she was 18. Because we were aware that there was a high risk of osteoporosis if we didn't get enough hormones, we demanded that her bone density be checked. They refused. Then she fell off a horse and fractured her wrist, so they agreed. So at the age of 18, it turns out that my cousin has osteopenia, beginning stages of osteoporosis. So she had to stop snowboarding, she had to stop horseback riding, she couldn't go rock climbing anymore with her scout trip, like all the sort of super active things that she loved to do were suddenly no longer on the table for her. Due to the fracture in her wrist, she also lost the ability to play the violin for over a year. For some reason, her fingers are still not quite as dexterous as they were. So for her, her osteopenia has meant that she has given up her lifelong dream of playing with the Icelandic symphony. And she was getting quite close. Her new dream is to be a music teacher, because she knows that it's unlikely that she will get the full range of movement back to her hand after this fracture. Our stories are actually among some of the best, in a sense, because we had supportive families, and we did not have surgery on our genitals. For those who have gone through genital surgery, scarring is extremely common. Lifelong pain is extremely common. Lifelong incontinence is far too common. So we, in a sense, were lucky that we escaped that. It is a privilege that we have. We have seen in Iceland that there has been almost no change in these things since my cousin was young. We have the case of a very recent case of a young mother who gave birth to an intersex child who was visibly intersex at birth. She was promised access to a psychologist, but she was sent home, and they provided no support, no information, nothing for 9 months. So for 9 months, she was basically home alone, having no clue what was going on, know what was wrong with her child, because they would only tell her that there was something very serious and very seriously wrong. So a recent example that is less than 3 years old of a parent being left without information, causing undue fear, undue stress. Very often we will be told that what happened to us older people, I'm 35, so a bit older, isn't what is happening today anymore. And then we meet 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds or 18-year-olds, or parents reach out to us. And the exact same things are happening again and again and again. It's become a vicious cycle of that this issue is so taboo that nobody is trained in a way to treat these parents and these children in a respectful way, providing them the information that they need in a way that they can understand. Too often we hear from parents who come back from doctor's visits where they sat in a room with 5 or 6 medical specialists who were all talking, and using medical jargon, language that these parents just did not understand at all. It wasn't put forward in a way that they could understand it. And yeah, parents need patience. They need psychological support. They need somebody to sit with them and explain to them that this isn't something that is so uncommon. At least 1.7% of the world's population is born with some variation of sex characteristics. A large proportion of them will never actually know that they are born with a variation in sex characteristics, but 1.7% isn't that uncommon. So when parents are told that they will probably never meet anyone like themselves, anyone in the same situation as they are. That's a lie. As soon as we see sort of intersex organizations form in countries, like for example the UK, we also see parents groups sort of start to form more, because these parents, they are all looking for other parents in the same situation as them. I don't think I've ever spoken to an intersex person who said, oh, my parents would not have wanted to meet another parent. I've never spoken to an intersex person in person who said, I would never want to meet another intersex person. However, due to societal stigma, we do hear, I do not want to meet another intersex person in my country. What if we run into each other on the streets and they say something and I have to explain something to the people I'm with? So, because we are told that this is so shameful, that this is something we have to keep a secret, it leads to shame and stigma that is highly internalized to a level that in countries where the taboo is higher, the fear is also higher. But yeah, there is hope. We have, for example, medical professionals attending this webinar. I'm especially thankful to see medical students attending here, because it's the medical students who will bring about change. It's the medical students who will change the future, because we at least hope that hearing stories such as ours will lead the future medical professionals to start treating families and people like ourselves respectfully and with dignity. So, I'm told that there is supposed to be a Q&A. Martin? Hello?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm here, and I was listening, and thank you so much for this lecture, very personal. Thank you for bringing us closer to the reality that is still the reality of too many intersex individuals worldwide. Now I would like to ask people attending the webinar, if you have any questions, if you have some questions, can you just click on the smiley that is on the left, and there should be podnieś rękę or raise your hand, depends on the language that you're using, and you can ask the question. You can as well write down your question and send it in a chat, and we will try to answer. Meantime, I have one question for you, Kitty. Is there any like place with the resources that the medical students or medical doctors can reach out to for the information that are you know, correct, and they are kind of leading the doctors in the right way and taking care of intersex people?
Sorry, you're breaking up.
Yeah, where would you say?
Sorry, I didn't hear half of what you said.
Students for sorry. Hello?
Yep.
Is it better now?
Yep.
Yeah, so where would you send the doctors or medical students for the resources to learn more about intersex and how to properly take care of intersex people?
So I'd recommend checking out the websites of intersex organizations. So there are, for example, OII Europe. So oiieurope.org. We have some resources there. But when it comes to sort of resources, they are too few and too far between. I would recommend, yeah, go to our website, oiaeurope.org, check out other, down by the side you'll find websites for intersex organizations across, so from Australia, from the US and other places. Check out their resources as well. Doesn't matter which country they come from, it's the same issues that are being addressed. Do critical research yourselves. I can, for example, highly recommend a research paper which was published by the University of Zurich based on a study called Shaping Parents: The Impact of Contrasting Professional Advice. This research was this research basically showed that the way that doctors present information has a huge impact on whether parents choose or consent to having surgical interventions performed on their child. There are research papers. There's a research paper out there by Carmack on hypospadia, which shows how high the rates of complications are. Like, there's a lot of research out there. Do your own critical research. So I have a question here. If you have 3 top rules for medical professionals when it comes to contact with intersex parents or their parents, what would it be? Only 3?
You can eat more.
Be truthful. Always tell the truth. Never lie. Be clear and simple. Do not fall into the trap of explaining things in hugely complicated medical terminology. Explain things in a way that the parents can understand. Use simpler words. And the third is a third would be treat people with dignity and respect. Respect who they say they are. If you're dealing with an intersex adult, if an intersex adult comes in and says, "Hi, my name is," and whatever, and says that she's a woman, it doesn't matter whether you think she looks like a woman or not. That's her gender identity. She's a woman, so treat her like that. Question the motives of the treatments that you offer. Examine the motives behind what you are offering this parent, and there has to be a distinction between treatments that are medically necessary, that is, something that can be rationalized purely and solely on the basis of the health of the child or the person involved. If your rationale for offering the treatment is, it's better for a boy to be able to pee standing up, that's not a health reason, that's a social reason. Then you're performing an intervention based purely on the fact that you think that it's better for a boy to pee standing up. So just examine the motivations behind your actions. Are they social or cultural? Or are they actually medical and within your realm of expertise?
Yeah, there's another question from...
Do you believe that the majority of the problems you and your cousin faced would have been avoided if the doctors had been more qualified, as regards informing your parents and the choice of treatments? Yes. if my doctor hadn't been so stubborn and insisted that either that my mother lied to me and then we continue lying to my doctor, no, then we continue lying to my cousin on our doctor's orders, we would have had a very different sort of experience of him if he would have realized when we told him that it was wrong to keep this a secret from me and sort of supported us in our choice to do things differently. We would have had a very different experience of him. When it comes to our hormones treatments, he was clueless and making guesses and basing them not on how we were feeling. The primary concern of a doctor is, of course, that your patient feels well, feels okay, that their body feels okay. So if you have an intersex person coming in saying the hormones you're giving me, like they're not working, they're doing this, they're doing that, then listen to them and take them seriously and like examine what could be the causes. Maybe another hormone treatment is preferable for this person. Maybe they'll react better to that. Always try and give parents as much information as possible, and do not tell parents to lie to their children. Try to support them in giving their children age-appropriate information. It's not your decision that a parent withholds information like this from a child.
There is one person who would like to ask. Thank you, Kitty. There's one person who would like to ask a question. Connecting. The person who would like to ask the question should now accept the possibility of taking his voice. We cannot hear you. I'm really sorry. Now it should work. Kaya?
Was it Anna Teresko who was trying to connect?
No. But meantime, we can try to answer that question from Anna Teresko, if you don't mind.
Yeah, in Iceland, we do a lot of awareness raising, visibility work. We provide a lot of lectures to the University of Iceland, so both to medical students, nursing students, sexology students, psychology students, queer studies students. We've also been working with a member of the Icelandic Parliament on legislation that would actually ban interventions on social or cultural grounds and basically demand that interventions such as these be rooted in actual medical grounds. So a blocked urethra, that needs to be fixed because a person needs to be able to expel urine. So things like that are, so we've been working on legislation of that nature now for 2 years and are hoping to see it put forward very soon.
Thank you. Okay, it seems like we don't have more questions. If there's someone, who would like to ask something more, feel free to do that. Meantime, I would like to thank you again, Kitty, for this personal lecture and, as I said, bringing us closer to the reality that is still the reality of too many people. And I can say from the campaign against homophobia perspective, we are trying to do some work on intersex and start to do some work on this in this field. And we planned more activities for next year, which are actually involving medical practitioners, too, for next year and 2019 too. So if there's anyone who would like to take part and be more active in this field, that would be more than great. I would like to take this opportunity as well to promote the research that Campaign Against Homophobia created a few months ago. It's available on our website, and we can send it as well for you for free if you want. That's research in Polish, a very practical guide for the medical practitioners on how to take care of LGBTI people, and there's part of intersex in this handbook. It basically summarized briefly what Kitty said today about giving information and treating seriously the consent of the person. So I would direct you to our website, which is www.kph.org.pl. And I would like to take this opportunity as well to invite you for our next webinars, which will take place next week. It's going to be about psychosexual health of LGBTI people, and 3 more coming in January. You can find all the information on our website. So again, website of Campaign Against Homophobia, which is www.kph.org.pl. And I would like to thank to all of you, to UKT, and to all of the attendees today, for your time and for listening to this personal lecture. And Kitty, would you like to add something from yourself?
Just thank you all for coming. I hope you continue receiving education on these issues and related issues.
Thank you so much. So have a good night, all of you, and see you next time.